Greenhill Fall Classic, round 4. The round I broke the masterpiece.
The round you broke what?
The masterpiece.
I'm so scared of what we're at for.
Best staff you've ever seen.
I sincerely doubt it will be the best I've ever seen.
Okay, maybe it'll be in like the top 50%.
That's a much more reasonable ask.
Okay. Yes. Are you ready? Okay. You ready, Pat?
Send it.
Alright, it's sent.
Well, send it as in like go, not like I know the doc is sent. Give your fucking speech, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir. The contention is computation. The use of computation in algorithms is not neutral, rather walks as an extension of and an integral part of racial capitalism's code of the world, which walks in fractal fascism and racialization. That's Bauer 21. Capital was always computer, world computer, understands modification process of encrypting the world's qualities as quantities from racialization to information. And say machines keeping most capitals, calculus, we are experiencing near apocalyptic world scale ability to address carceral systems, genocide, militarism, racism, pandemic, anti-blackness, extraction, racial capital, render democratic governance outdated. Modes of extraction take the form of fascism, only direct engagement with computation through reprogramming of distraction, of abstraction can secure victory, decolonization of information, computation, algorithms of violence, reading and writing of code on bodies, surveillance over coding algorithms executed on the flesh by means of codification violently imposed, reformatting of bodies, imposes social categories of race, gender, religion, pride, property, ideologically, psychologies, contract rights, and abstraction imposed by the code of race functions of the system, systematically predetermined, unequal redistribution of the global resources, reformatting correlates race and value, racial capitalism embarks on imposing this calculus globally, encode social difference, draws from slavery, colonialism, state formation, of genocide, gender oppression, pogroms, and militarization, policing, parasites, and pursuit of power as the world computer, inscribing itself on everything else. The world computer takes civilizational racism role and sends deeply into capitalist calculation, computational racial capitalism, thus we understood the generalization and computation of the extension of capital that require calculus social difference, include those followed by slavery and blackness and other racism, computation recognized as a practical result of an ongoing bloody struggle between the wood habitals and the to be dispossessed. The local instance of computation may seem neutral. Computation is the result of the struggles indexed by race, gender, sexuality, nationality, and ethnicity, abstraction, emergence, codification of race, gender, sexuality, geography, credit, and time, and access to the right to housing is filtered through financialization by the coding of racial divides through use of data and supposedly colorblind algorithms to reproduce racial segregation, enslavement, and otherization. That's because the central data is profit maximization is filtered through racism. That's filtered Raven 21. Financialization understood in terms of racial capitalism through extraction, hierarchies, organized relations, housing financialization, site which racial divides are encoded, combines finance data and digital type technologies, perpetuate bias, receiving objectivity, housing, incorporates existing divides, creates divisions, algorithms construct racialized character upon which right housing relies, whiteness, racial other, within credit databases based not just on histories, but stats that are legacy of discrimination models, that rights allocated, deny housing, reducing divides, love around lending in African American neighborhoods, credit scoring, entrenching, and mortgage scoring, split, and risk in ways in line to forms of racial dispossession, banks used red lending maps, data segregation, non-white places, redlining was powerful, obscure gospel, and segregation, degradation, dispossession, displacement, continued communities, classes, low value, high risk, inquiring, revaluation that results in displacement, serve to drain capital and perpetuate racial wealth gap, valuation systems incorporate race, naturalizing, withholding the spaces coded as non-white violence, inherent to unruly separation of people from their homes, digitalize and obscure this by introducing intermediaries, naturalizing K-death of a black census space as part of full white supremacy, settler, socio-racial dialectic, Glen, productive, profitable finance is not new, financial relations long and deeply racialized, combination with automated and digitized technologies, housing financialization, reconfigures racism, shifting into automated systems, and computational capitalism is collapsing around us and taking the world with it. Tensions between the U.S. and its adversaries are bolstering by the day. Distraction from crises at home that accelerates over-accumulation, nuclear war, climate change, fascism, and racial inequality globally. That's Robinson 21. Washington reps up nuclear war, military configuration, bigger picture, driving this capitalism crisis, economic stagnation, the economy crisis, capitalist investment, billions of people rush the system groups, must channel fear, towards scapegoated, rising tensions, expanding military budgets, profit making through war, capitalism faces over-accumulation, expanding and escalating inequality, through undermining stability of the system, capitalist class, difficulty in finding outlets to unload surplus systems, basic structural crisis, economies become dependent on warfare, accumulation economy, relies on war making industrial complex profits, quadruple virus, war, state facilities, the expanded by facilitating global weapons sales, war on drugs and terrorism, and will become profit making, drive to examine the crisis, increase the danger, tensions will lead to war, heightens the consumption of capital worldwide, and worsens social inequality, nuclear war will inseminate this, neo-fascist movements and proliferate as democracy breaks down in contradictions, borders on global civil war, and thus the plan. The United States ought to guarantee the right to housing, codifying the right to housing as part of a global fight against racial capitalism. Reforms are necessary to challenge the state on its own terms. That's IR 17. For-profit housing failing will reveal declining homeownership rates increase, skyrocketing rent, half pay 30% of income, and around 500,000 people are homeless. Supply and demand neglect. It's not profitable to build housing for the poor, far more lucrative to build condos for the elite. Results show this starkly driving force the problem is capitalism treats housing as a casino. Housing dominated by big business, speculation drives up price. Cities transforming into playgrounds for rich, shift effects, VOC, and single moms. Weakness of strategies dependent on crowded developers, managers to extract as much profit as possible, not benevolently socialist support, improvement of right relief, solving housing wars, millions of people under idea, housing is a human right, not possible to provide housing for all, and capitalism fight for affordable housing. Linked to broader struggles of working class strongest when connected to racial labor movement, retain is incredible potential power of world and when of housing, the needs of profits, fight for a socialist world to make life better for all. And the app does not claim to end system power critiques, but it paves the way for a post-capitalist being and reshapes and reclaims systems of domination as a step in the right direction. It's part of a greater general strike against computation, reappropriating its apparatuses for our own purposes. That's Bellwar 21. As with plantation factory institutions for domination faces a revolutionary conscience, consider collectively of that. What are ways we might create non-capitalism becoming computing and money are inseparable, abolish one to abolish the other, enable oppressed communities to leverage world-making capacity to occupy money, re-engineer computation and our desires to other than generated context for capital, take what is social without credit and debt, building economy capable of recognizing mutual indebtedness, honoring values, and contribution we make can take down digital information. Marxism becoming anti-racist, feminist, queer, decolonial endeavor requires we demonstrate the encroachment of the digital in dialectical modification over 7 centuries implies new acting, seizing of the means of production, the seizure thought of as retaking our attention to reverse subsumption as acting and that would release aspirations foreclosed by techniques, endeavor of global proportions. Such a revolution must make participants authors of the distribution of the values, be a derivative revolution, not allowing efforts to make change, reduce new content for fashion, and thrive, essentially refuse the digital program. Neither letting nor acceleration requires complexity while embracing notion. Liberation can only be non-exploited and contradicted by all those who are oppressed. New guards and same will not free the inmates. Only by supporting revolution, masses become authors of history and prioritize solving ongoing crises. Otherwise, we kick the can down the road and are never able to address the world that is collapsing around us. That means that you should always prefer probability and time frame over magnitude claims, because we know that our impacts are likely as we're seeing them now and have been seeing them for years. And skip the last card. Okay. I don't think there needs to be a marked doc. That's it. Okay. Let me just set a timer. Alright, go if you want.
Did you extend anything for case?
Yeah. So I said that you should prioritize time frame and probability because we know these things are happening now, and anything else needs to be sit back and watch the world collapse around us. As we're so busy thinking about something bigger happening that we're not able to focus on what's happening now.
So the world collapsing around us? Why is
It's
that?
a metaphor, it's not like literal. It's like we're seeing these effects happening, we're seeing that capitalism faces the crisis of overaccumulation, we're seeing that people are evicted from their homes, excluded, and so if we think about like, oh, in 10 years something bad might happen, then it just means that we'll never actually be able to address these problems now.
Okay, what is a right?
A right? What do you mean by what is a right?
What is a right?
Something to be, like, it is like an innate, something that all people are born with, that like gives them something or gives them freedom from something.
All people? Who counts as people?
What do you mean by that?
Who is a person?
So our thesis claim is that the world computer has rendered certain people as non-human, but we would say that all people are people. Like, not like that means that like even if they've been epidermalized or like marked for death, then they're still people. I think the Bellwar.
How do you solve for that?
What do you mean how we solve for that?
You do say it, okay.
As an effect of
How
the
do we
plan,
determine who is a rights-bearing individual?
everyone is a rights-bearing individual.
Everyone?
Why wouldn't it be? A right has to apply to everyone.
Okay.
And the plan solves historical changes like.
How do you solve?
I think that our Fields and Random card, I'm just finishing what I was saying. It specifically says that like some people have been given these rights where others haven't, where that's where the app comes in. How do I solve what?
How do you solve for the impact?
So the app is like, I think that the last Bellwar card specifically articulates that like the way that we reform institutional domination by deferring them to those who have suffered.
What
is
does that
like,
mean?
What do you mean? What is what?
What does your app do?
What do you mean? Like, what does mine have to do? Guarantee a right to housing?
Or right to, and what does those signs look like? Are they like?
I would say that we defend it primarily as a policy or actions made to prevent evictions and like racialized and gender specific like evictions to prevent.
Does that assume
and, like,
you have a
giving
house to
access,
be evicted from?
Well, those things are actually why some people don't have houses now. If that's what you're asking.
Okay, got it.
I don't think that you need a house to be evicted. It doesn't need to be a house, but like the problems we
Who do you provide housing to?
Everybody.
everybody, not just everybody in the U.S.?
Everybody comes into the U.S. Under anyone that's in the U.S. government would have to then provide.
How does that combat racial capitalism?
Well,
by just providing.
I think that our last dollar card is good on this. I can explain it again, but it paves the way for non-capitalist being by reclaiming systems that were set up to keep people down. And I think the Irish card also answers this.
I'm gonna take a trip.
Let me get some water. I'll be back.
Here you go, man.
Thank you. That's 1:30.
I'm so mad. The water fountain in the store is broken.
Yeah.
Is it?
I'm so mad right now. Not at y'all, don't worry about it.
I was
Also, just like an appropriate asshole.
I'm so sorry. Oh, by the way, I'm so sorry. The Nike it fell off. I felt so bad. I was like, oh god.
Okay, order.
One off case.
Okay. Did you send
Cool.
Gem 10.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm good whenever.
I'll tell you what I have.
Hang on, I didn't.
Yeah, I haven't judged you before. I don't open docs during debates, so assume I'm good if I'm at my computer. Just whatever's through.
That scared me last time because I noticed the judge wasn't looking at the doc at all, like he did on a computer. And I was like, oh shoot, I gotta go slow.
You don't have to go slow.
Not with
I
me.
promise I can keep up.
Okay.
This is the go right here.
Alright.
Just one case.
One off.
Yeah, and I'm still working on it. Oh, it went to spam. Okay, I'm downloading it.
Why did you get sent to spam?
Dude, I've read disclosure people because their disclosure went to my spam like twice. I feel
It's the first shit I always check.
I feel so bad about it.
Okay.
Classic.
So one off in the case. Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Starting now. The focus on right to housing begs the question of who and why the humans are rights bearing individual analytic of human rights is undergirded by the structure of anti-core balance and categories revised as already evaluated from the category of Lucian and 15. I think it was arguments that the humanists understanding the limit of time for the potential community such as the social structure by and so forth to human rights and traditional granted is the figure of agency like the niceness of the human the nice to the something to be human is to play with the liberal and similar feel that it's just a way to really damage well openness to the debate of humanity in disguise which effectively and remain as normalized way to figure of man implicitly and heterogenic paradigm in the third sense of the human as we say that inherent differentiator and other persons of life and offers us an idea of humanity naturality and study things about natural and marxist like the species for us here was thought about capitalism and vision superior and divided utility that human species both here and has one of like and on here and just present the individual and solving share one thing to do about economy the form of the human race and from the slate of humanization marginalization remain characteristics of control for those who study pre-intent those who use of bias arguments. Creatures are actively delegated how the category of human beings deserving of rights, whether it be housing or right to housing or right to life. The impact is over rich countries today, and country versus free subject beyond death. It's point of dying since the only unable to contribute to the foundation of hotel, but in any turns case, in that license of some sympathy. Stand 11. Overkill is substituted violence, efficiency, and it stops determined by prescriptive people, offense, the protector, evidence, the violence, the violence, time of the heart is, it stops pushing blood, you have to not finish. The aim is to be the end of life, but the end of all core life is equal to death, and utility advance, the victim pleasure, crucial part, nothing, the passive feeling, let's go beyond number of times life, death. What are the range of humor signify the way some makes the way of mistake, whereas nothing, the unexpected life, the natural one mentioned, the one that forces the murder, the motion, the macro out of him, the human should realize something, and lower down, like names, right, something, the human makes something unnecessary, the human is rise in the place of life, and the happens upon price of death. The next negative of the subject, the consumptive acts, something should not be right as an individual pathology, and they may dictate their towards in which they are not there, overkill, what I mean, must mean to do not advance, to do nothing. The structure of the human, the home is built to shelter, hidden over miles of nuclear family, that rise notions of housing humans, and impossible to curse. You find a place in these homes because they inherently reject queerness. We're at 17. The problem with courthouse can never go away because the first center component of Queen's house, the single point is nursery, is a center component of heterosexual hegemony. All housing is designed to headed on the student heteronormativity, even family is incapable. It is designed to be from straight notion that its construction doesn't have form and non-hegemonic process access. Nuclear families provide to the house, the bedroom serves things for family, the bedroom roles, same like sexual focus, the bedroom, high job, by life, person, stream, physical, physical, right kinds of gender roles, eliminating anything dirty, focus on the reproducibility and reputation, while person, policy, the house has that to provide and maintain. The idea of nuclear families has social protection, the body squeeze their ideas removed, the seconds, and the idea of person, they like access to locked doors. There's one of no place or one approach to these core bodies, where the extermination camp of people like horizontal and housing is an architectural expression of heteronormativity. The version of housing can only bolster the nuclear family. Queer housing is a contradiction. The holistic queer home is necessary precursor for access to housing of any kind of construction for housing that are constantly changing and transforming and challenging heteronormativity as a spatial cripple can reside in peace. And couple as part of the card. Brian 15. Of course, the Carlin receiving around the host housing static opposite of the sites of contemporary change and transformation which more and all changes occurring on the home. Lower takes the heterosexual family and emotionally to the and non-state relationship women to each other, and it's the movement leading the different kind of home and the rejects the house difference. First, the heteronormative homes can be this, in this reverse as for inspired the construction of the home concept, familiar meaning or formally with a different source from reflecting on the queer systems of business, gathering things which recognize and practices the legal construction of queer home, or characterize the queer home, or very conscious of this is different than the secret of anyone places to queer to serve home, incorporates into place in the those in the house by simply gender and sexual roles, simplicity, heteronormative known, the very husband and virtue, purpose of any one place of social security, of unchurched group, island, apology, different, and maybe often you do different spells on to eradicate them. We don't remain in the degrees that speaks the program allows to such a way to the kind of set norms. Greenhill norms is reducing the normalized trends. The rule of balance versus the best of the models for curriculum it's a reciprocal evidence we title the way is a core question of what and every extent they took in the way seeks defending its applicability to their best. Prior to epistemology, only this encapsulates the inherent need to integrate over to new character biases. And Euro 21. Critics articulate epistemology had anything but technically as well, probably technically in fashion to the concept of inequality, not only reference to certain ways of knowing, other ways of knowing, thereby determine what was intelligent without imaginable. Will produce a wider range of better and more diverse outputs. We can recognize the limitations of these element frames and the universalities like critics and imagine how magic can be used to rationalize showing material effects as cyber certain advantages of the case or for others. It is necessary to address questions of representation as well as redistribution on the case. First, to turn the 1AC localized resistance as well, meaning resilience fragility that strips away in favor of capitalist nature to neoliberalism. The big creates a market economy for the repetition of their project with saps radical potential, evidence in Read 14. Strategies of resiliency conform to access the localized effects of their vulnerability, educational resilience, goes on to fulfill their near level potential. Resistance is rather than a social code combines with the political ambition to attend for the very source of inequality and issues experienced by marginalized small populations. Resistance is complete with resistance. Resistance always becomes a normalized standard for mapping out the behavior and connecting the order of things to conform without ultimately challenging the wider relations of power. And their thesis is wrong. The rule is not included by algorithmic accumulation. Markland 21. Proponents emphasize the ruptures wrought by deification in the new modes of governments to reconceptualize humanity under technological and critical anti-capitalist perspectives that are united to highlight universal transformations brought about by technological change. One of the pitfalls of this totalized catharsis is the neglect of the particular. Not all spheres are moving the same pace when they're exposed to tech. Deification had uneven impacts in different fields. The absolutely exists between big tech and politics. Not all fields are conducive. Digital infrastructure that diversify tools. They do not necessarily transform epistemic practices. Transformative potential depends on the value actors. Integration has been one of the slow adoption, not revolution, and totalizing claims. It's certainly a picture but not visual to get into the actual way of technology. Innovations are instituted within different fields of practice. Second, even if Ballard's theory is correct, is reactive and has nothing past explanatory power. Should be 07. Ballard fluctuates between sense of conscious life is impossible to escape it and is restored by story and resistance of other concrete analysis and supports its revolutionary optimism for which they relentlessly endeavor to decode the conditions of their own formation. But the strategy doesn't work any more than it only adds to statistical work. And Ballard is very aware that sort of substantively ambiguous and absolutely necessary margin is subject to the capital logic itself. Where I find Ballard's genuinely convincing. I don't think we live in the cinematic age or mode of production any longer, but in another media regime entirely, Ballard's strategy therefore is entirely fails. And no obsolescence, they say we provide material houses. The same action the state uses to make itself look better without having to solve for the underlying structural problems was making it impossible to access homes. We've already said why they can't solve for epistemology, and even though they say the state is bad, they're actually endorsing the state by not actually trying to address these underlying problems and just saying providing homes solves for all racial capitalism. And what does it mean to have a right to housing when you don't have the ability to live or travel or live in a poor neighborhood and nobody to come to areas because it's located to build a community? All like places like where economic centers of value are determined by the analytic of the human. The problem with rights conversations is they ignore the way individuals are cornered by hierarchy to justify that all rights are universal. The ideas that rights constitute universality, so the generic right to housing, every university gets to experience the exclusive right, but the reason that this does not make sense is that we understand that the human already predetermines your ability to exercise predictive rights based on factors not considered in assigning that right. They fail to note to make the distinction between access versus accessibility. You can claim to provide housing, but you fail to solve for what is outside the realm of policy's focus, where economic studies of value are determined. The Crossix was pretty damning this because they literally said it was a policy action, and the only way to solve this through the neck by interrogating what concepts or rights we can uniquely turn away and remove such notions of how do not rely on catering to the figure of man, thus queering the home. And I'm ready for cross.
Okay. Alright, okay, here we go.
All these link arguments seem to be about the status quo. How is there a link to the app?
Because the app uses the analytic of rights and the analytic of the human.
Okay. Why are rights bad?
We're saying rights are bad because they don't apply. The very concept of rights relies on the analytic of the human, which is based on the figure of man, which is this white, heterosexual
Why is
man.
that?
That's our Luciano and Chen 15 evidence. We're saying that is what is used to determine what qualifies as a human and thus who qualifies as a rights-bearing
Okay, so
individual.
the problem is that people aren't seen as humans, like, or bodies or whatever term you want to use. The bodies that are not seen as human, is that the problem?
The problem is that queerness is left out of the rights conversation.
Okay. I guess, like, what does it mean to queer the home?
Queering the home is accepting the house of difference, which makes room for these different forms
Yeah, what
of
is the
living.
house of difference?
That's in like Audre Lorde's memoir. She literally talks about how
I don't know who that is, so.
you don't know who okay.
I've never.
Okay, yeah, sure. So she is a black lesbian who embraces the house of difference, and she lives with a woman she calls
But what
Zombies.
is the house of difference? I don't want to know who came up with it. I want to know what is the house of difference.
It is the house that is implicit, that refuses the certainties about gender that are implicit to the heteronormative home model. It houses the displaced and the different and refuses to use this analytic of the human to still provide housing.
Okay. Alright. I guess, like, what does your role of ballot entail? Can the affirmative operate under your role of ballot?
No, because that would be severing. She would sever out of the position.
So the
she was in.
affirmative can't. Okay. I guess, so there's no way for the app to win.
I don't know. See what you do.
But under your role of ballot. Okay, I guess, like,
When you
can you
affirm
explain this Evans and Reed evidence? What is the warrant? Like, what is this saying? It's just saying that, like, when we take the strategy of, like, resilience, that it gets co-opted.
We're saying that essentially resilience is not the same as resistance, and it strips away agency.
What's the distinction?
Resilience and resistance.
Yeah.
Resilience is a normalized form of behavior.
Because
Where
how is
one
it
and see
normalized?
critiques normalizing behavior.
Okay. I guess, like, this Markland evidence seems to talk about, like, what is the warrant in Markland?
We're saying that the world is not. You say that the world is a code about algorithmic accumulation. We say it's not.
Okay, why not? I want the warrant.
The warrant.
Yeah,
It's
why?
in the car. It,
Yeah, but I
it
want you
says.
to tell me the warrant, because I don't see it in the car.
Sure. It says that new modes of governance for conception of humanity under a technological time when use anti-gap or use compared structures and there's transformations are about technological change. They still are with the frame of the human.
Okay, so it seems like the idea of humans. Okay. Okay. I think I'll just stop there. 5 minutes prep. I'll start right now.
Oh, Sterling, looks like your phone stopped recording.
Let me just pause it. Yep.
Maybe, I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's just low battery. Thanks, though, Pat.
Well, I hope it was recording.
Yeah,
That's how it sounded.
okay.
I don't think either of us are in frame, dude.
It doesn't matter.
I'm the most important part.
Yeah.
Restart your phone.
What?
It's a restart your part. Okay. Sorry. You're good.
Okay, I'll stop right there.
You can take that.
Hopefully it doesn't collapse this time.
It didn't for me.
Okay, it's just gonna be the athletic neck, the case, and then the can.
Cool. Do I need like room for an overview on the case page? Or am I just like straight?
Or actually, yeah, briefly.
Just like here's our impact software. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. 4 minutes. Are you ready, man? You're good with that. Okay. Okay. Ready?
They have conceded the warrants from the Robinson evidence and the first piece of Delaware evidence, which prove that if we win, that the affirmative is able to solve or has a risk of offense, then you should vote affirmative because of the fact that otherwise the system is collapsing around us. We won the meaningless question that that the system is unable to be sustained because of the new Cold War, which is actually going on due to the crisis of overaccumulation. That's Robinson, and the Delaware card specifically talks about how the desire for overaccumulation has caused impacts like climate change, disease, and war. So you should not grant them new arguments against this. And I'll answer their arguments here. One is he wanted the Afghans co-opted, so does the alt, and no it doesn't. They haven't indicted our specific model or how the affirmative discourse is resilience versus resistance. They could not give me a clear reason why other than that resilience is normative, but they haven't proven that the app is normative. Well, when the app isn't humanist, but he's better for queer bodies. When is he to hold the line here? Because the warranty in cross is not a warrant. They have also conceded that housing operates under algorithmic ratios, which means that on the same level that our thesis is right, at least in context of the 1AC, extend Beller, how bodies are marked to algorithmic user technologies in order to separate the humans from the people that are marked as human human from non-humans. That means that the affirmative is a prerequisite to the critique. And 1C3, even if Beller can't explain what we should do, the affirmative definitely can, because we've identified that the way that we're able to reshape these things through the prescription of guaranteeing the right to housing, we're able to reform these systems of domination which were originally created to keep people down, to bring them up and fight the state. 1C5, we do not, or 1C4, we do, yes, we do solve. They have conceded that last piece of Beller evidence that was explained above. 1C5, we do not endorse the state, but rather we make demands on it. They drop the IRS, so it means that reforms are necessary for socialism to take root, so reject the arguments in short are about this. And additionally, what it means to make a demand is that we force the government to do this. We do not say that the government necessarily wants this, and the government obviously doesn't, and they haven't done it yet. 1C6 is bad neighborhoods and claims to provide housing is not what I told you in cross-ex. I clearly said that the plan is defended as the idea that people are not given bad loans, i.e. that we restrict the ideas of how housing ownership is restricted, and we protect people from racialized evictions, which means that people are given the right to housing that way. We're not claiming to provide housing, but rather claim to overcome the barriers that make housing inaccessible to bodies marked for death by society. Okay. One, framework, way the consequence of the plan against our representations, their interpretation less than shift the terms of the DA and exclude 6 departments, which racks competitive equity and clash by eliminating comparison in favor of arbitrary prerequisites. They can't come back and say that they aren't unfair, because they literally told me in cross-ex that the affirmative cannot operate under the role of the ballot, so you know that it is objectively unfair. Additionally, that means that the role of the ballot is to vote for the better debater for the reasons warranted above and reject 2 in our impact terms as 2 new and destroys the 2 error. 2 is extinction outweighs life as prerequisites to ontology. Nearly every queer person would agree. If you ask a queer person if they feel like their life is meaningless, they will be confused. It's the same reason that poor people or homeless people don't kill themselves. 3, their card says nothing about queerness on the framing stuff. The app also accesses epistemology of it, so even if they win framing, the app still matters. We still get link terms or permutation. 4 is no link in term. The world computer has created an abstraction that turns people into data, which is responsible for racism, queer violence, trans violence, and the idea of the concept of the human. The app solves by dismantling the world computer, which means that if you think we want a risk of offense, then we are better than the critique, because we'll win that the critique can't solve anything on its own. And 5, the app destroying neoliberalism solves and removes possessive individualism by providing everyone a right of housing, regardless of whether the world computer has marked those bodies as human or not. And 6, we link terms Stanley technologies which make queer violence possible or part of the world computer. And 7, last, that justifies permutation, do the app, and then the all app gives people a right to housing, so queer people can gain self-determination. Queering the home is not possible without the right to housing, because we're all controlled by the hegemonic world computer. And 8 is permutation, do well, then double-minded. If we can overcome limits with this well, then the affirmative is a drop in the bucket. You should rethink how you view affirmative solves, especially since we want a uniqueness and impact claim, which means that you should keep error affirmative here on risk of offense, saying that they are not able to solve the case, but we make an attempt to, which is good, because the alternative of not doing the app is watching the world collapse around us. That was the accepted warrant at the bottom of the 1AC, which was that you should evaluate things based on the crises happening now and allow the consequences of understanding, because otherwise we are never able to deliberate and understand what we can do to solve these problems that we all agree are bad. But that's proven by the fact they did not read impact defense. And the debate kill psychological project, that was just answered right now. We're doing it to discuss strategies to resist hegemonic systems. Just that. Okay.
Okay. No doc. It's going to be overview links. I mean, K, then case.
Okay, so it's what?
K case.
Okay.
Do I need your room for like a overview on the campus?
Yeah.
Thank you for being honest. I usually go to politics here. It's bad.
You don't like the 6-minute overview?
No, I really can say, honest to God, Sterling, I haven't given an overview in like 3 years. I'm and I.
Hey man, I like my overviews. I put a lot of time in my overviews.
No overviews needed.
Coach too much today. It's not good. Well, it's whatever. It's whatever. It's whatever. Don't interpret my grumpiness as talking today. By all means.
You should.
Do your thing.
It's kind of thing.
Shut the hell up. Sterling, for the love of God.
If you vote against me for doing an overview,
I promise, for the love of God, I promise I will not vote affirmative just because the two and I is an overview.
I won't be
I have
there.
extensive thoughts on this we can talk about at another time, but
Let's-
I want to hear this speech.
Okay.
Case, yes, overview. I'm good when Sterling is.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. Alright, now in the world of her necessity for houses that have been structured at the center heteronormative knowledge of the community plan and background anything queer out. Every room in the home is built to preserve social transactions and normal and inherently exclusionary upgrade bias is critically 17. You have to argue that they help cripple and they know housing is worse, but it's just because I think it's going to be something you should ignore the problem altogether. What does it mean to right to housing when you have the ability to live and travel? They did not answer this question, but the problem with conversations is they ignore the way individuals are coded on it, and which means we're a prerequisite. They still talk about like accessibility, but we already talked about it. It's access versus accessibility. You can come to provide housing, but you fail to solve for what actually helps individuals access this housing, because that is determined by the analytic of the human, and you are humanist because you affirm right to housing. And we're going to get on the link second. First, we're going to address clash really quick. Characterize combined rather than as devoid of clash limits assumes that queer students don't test resistance measure, which is wrong and homophobic, and a legacy of KDK debates disproves that K debates like this don't have clash. And onto the link. First is the humanism link. The idea of right housing begs the question of who qualifies as a right-spring individual. Every part of the way is built on positive affirmation of the analytic of the human. The idea that the way practices is more occupied like these people live in isn't neutral, instead built on the asatiable desire to restore order and stability to the category of the human that is built on anti-parameterization. That's Luciano and Chen. Anti-providence is always a figure of the moment. The way desire to provide housing is only one of the liberal topics, so attempt to charge past the moment of past housing related of anti-global violence in the sake of a more comforting narrative. It's the same logic that allows global powers to claim positive progress provokes while denying access to basic services domestically. The impact is overkill, production of the human analytic regardless of the ways he does from complex disorders beyond the brink of zones into zones of erasure. Our silent evidence for instance is the human and the queer are opposed because humanity relies on the ability to be seen as a right for excited or queer are not. It inputs the plan regardless of what opportunities exist, and evaluation of other queer folk actually is deserving of access to those. And the second is the housing link. Value housing doesn't lie in its accessibility, but it's a symbolic value as a source of benevolent governmentality. However, the basis for that governmentality is the idea that rights and business are extended to everyone. It is a concept of universality. We are impact turning to quote Ripley 17. Housing is an extermination camp for queer bodies. It turns the entire case because it promotes an idealized neighborhood of housing for everyone, risk the political reality that it can't enforce anti-discrimination. Increasing access to a system such as housing presumes that the system is good, which for people isn't true. Why do people who want to have been systemically disenfranchised want to engage in a system which will ultimately be used to inflict further violence on them that answers their system the system is collapsing arguments? We say yes, good. The system is bad, and we should reconstruct it on the framework. The debates are stemming about the one AC should run a system, what the one AC means, what not one AC does, which are all about the resource and methodology for critical reporting, favor don't evaluate concepts, we don't need to solve for the impacts of this resource project, we as critique our way, their way of thinking, prefer because it makes proposals better, understand the deep epistemic implications of our proposals, it creates a sustainable model of politics that guides action past the plan. What we'll remember is the epistemic sense we developed over time because it matters more for debate, and it comes first. We must think before you act. For you act selfish, you must think about the assumptions behind them. So even if they're right about like the system collapsing, you still need to think about the epistemology that their affirmative is based on, which is inherently harmful. You should, and the one that sees an epistemic test of whether to get the app in the first place, you wouldn't let an app weigh its advantage against the topicality, so you can't let them weigh the case against this K. Onto the alt. The alt is to deconstruct the very structure of the home through the process of queering the home. Instead of a static object designed to protect sanitized bodies deemed traditionally valuable, we take inspiration from objects stored in memory to recreate the home into a fluid house of difference, and we reject normalizing trends, which is literally in the card, which was the Evans and Reed 14 card, and we read in the 1 and C says that they can still engage with in their resilience. We're going to make a distinction later on case on the firms. AF does not give the access to the firms because the first, they all reject the AF that cannot force or reject them at the same time. Crossing is a contradiction. Replace 17, you can't provide housing without interiors if it's not a prerequisite. And by engaging, even if you say you don't use the state, you're still engaging with it and using the logic of the state by saying that providing housing will solve all the problems without actually addressing the structural issues. So the 1NC is a prerequisite, and 3, severance. It severs either representation by forcing rights, since they literally affirm the resolution. Anything else would allow the AF to arbitrarily skirt accountability for violent rhetoric. And 4, use to artificially separate the AF and the alternative on parallel tracks and maximize clash over their justifications for the plan. On the case, you can extend the term that strategy of resilience rely on social compliance and cannot transform sources of inequality. Resilience is not equal resistance, it's just normalizing strategy of behavior that conforms without challenging greater power. And the Markham 21 practice said that we have the capacity to escape technological governments and doesn't corrupt our ability to form communities or pursue democratic policies. And by focusing on the crises that are happening right now, you are avoiding discussions of queerness. And as we said before, you don't challenge the structural problems of these crises. So even if you buy the collapsing system argument, you are prerequisite, extend that the app has no solvency because they still use the logic of the state and do not challenge the state's epistemology, but rather adapt and normalize it. They say in cross-text, they literally said we provide material houses. It's the same action the state uses to make itself look better without actually having to address the underlying structural problems that make it impossible to access those homes. That was our whole access versus accessibility argument, which went completely uncontested, so you can extend it across the flow. All they said is that we provide houses for people, including queer people, and we should focus on the crisis because it's happening now. We're saying that before you can focus on the crisis or even have access to the consequences of the crisis, sure, it might be important, but you first have to critique the epistemology behind what they're proposing to do, which is providing housing. You can't have there's no perms because we've already said that would be severance, and we are literally, you are enforcing housing by making demands of the state, which is still using state logic, that providing material homes will solve all problems of inequality. It's not true. We've critiqued it coming out of the 1NC, or coming out of the 1NC. And thus we negate.
I have 2 minutes and 17 seconds.
I'm gonna go try and find some water downstairs somewhere.
None of the fountains have like good parts to drink off. They're all bottom floors. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for telling me this earlier.
I know, I would for 20 minutes earlier. Alright, I'm gonna start that. app and then egg. Briefly on the app. So case K. I'm gonna come over that.
As we're going for the link terms, we don't necessarily have to win case, but I'll answer their argument here that it's the only one that matters. They say that we use state logic and that the state is wrong, but no, these are demands. They've dropped the word that the state does not necessarily want to provide this, but we force them to in order to reappropriate the state for our own purposes, so far as we manage to make the state do something that we want, which benefits us. That's part of what Beller is talking about when he talks about reshaping institutional domination. We start with housing and move on to everything else. So that means that this argument is not that. They say that we provide houses, but I made it very clear we do not provide houses. The affirmative has never claimed we provide houses. The affirmative is very clear in cross-text that the affirmative generates freedom from eviction insofar as we aren't necessarily building houses for people or giving them free houses, but we're stopping them from existing racialized and gendered evictions, which is the Beller evidence and it's substantiated by the Field and Raymond evidence from the 1AC. You can read it and it's very clear on this. But I'm going to answer the critique now because it's very easy to vote affirmative on the link terms. They have dropped every link term argument, which proves that the affirmative is net better. We get to weigh those things as compared to the 1AC's reps, regardless of winning framework, which means that we don't necessarily have to win, that we have to weigh the case. We just get to win, that we get to weigh the affirmative's advocacy and what the affirmative endorses against that. That's key to substantive clash. Anything else causes moves to 1AC and manages to force us onto every other issue, which skews affirmative prep burden, because we aren't able to predict what exactly we would be defending, especially since all of their links are to the status quo. But I'm going to extend a link term here. There is no link term because the world computer is responsible for all of their impacts. The world computer has epidermalized bodies into the idea that the queer is not human, and that along with racialization, which means that the world computer is the root cause of racism, queer violence, trans violence, and the idea of the concept of the human in the first place. But by dismantling the world computer and advocating for a dismantling of that system, we actively resist it and mean that we do not link to decay in the first place. The true and honest red blocks on the links, but that does not necessarily matter if they have not one that we have a link in the first place, and they've dropped the app destroying neoliberalism solves because it removes possessive individualism by providing everyone a right to housing, regardless of whether the world computer has marked those bodies as human or not. And additionally, their Stanley evidence also is answered because they have dropped the technologies or the reason for this, and the last on the permutation that justifies this. These are the net benefits for it, which are that the permutation is able to overcome these because including of the app is necessary, or the all fails, which was also dropped because queer people do not have self-determination as per the 1C, which means that queering the home is not possible without a right to housing, and so the all fails would make the permutation necessary. I'll extend the permutation proper here. We're going for perm to the app and then the alternative. The net benefit is the link terms that were explained above. They are not no terms, all rejects. That was answered above on framework, and additionally we can win the link terms alone because they were dropped, which means you should give them a very high risk of being true. And they are not severance because we are including the idea of queering the home. Queering the home, your text of the all does not necessarily say reject the app, but the idea that we commit to something towards queering the home, which means even if we don't, if it is reject the app, then you can still weigh the link terms against that. The all definitely fails. The app definitely solves.
We get to weigh the app because of clash over that, and we get to at least weigh the link terms, which means that if you vote affirmative.
Good bit.
Good bit.
Thank you. Okay,
Long
okay.
day.
Huh?
Long day.
Something like that. Okay, cool. Are we good?
Yeah.
Right. Cool. This is a good debate. I had fun judging it. Thank you for letting me judge it. I'm F. Here's why. I think the problem with the 2NR is that while it certainly has all the ingredients, everything ends up being a little undercooked, so to speak. So I do think that like there is at the end of this debate like a decent risk of like this link argument about like the question of the structure of the home being heteronormative, because I don't really understand how the app like deconstructs those things. I think this is just like there's a dearth of explanation of both alternative solvency and app solvency on both sides of it. I think I need just like a more robust explanation in the one hour from you, Sterling, about just like how does the app's right to housing, how does it get enforced, right? What is sort of the reappropriation of architecture look like, right? I think like honestly for this app, my gut instinct is like go for like the right to the city type arguments, because I think that's kind of more in line with like Beller's argument, like reappropriating systems architecture, right? You could even bring in like the fucking like Ben Bratton, the stack stuff about like user layers, democratizing tech and shit like that, like the sort of global computation stuff, just like stuff like that, more explaining like what the app's vision of like computation infrastructure is and how it's like these demands can allow us to reappropriate these things. So I think that I'm very confused on like how the app does, but I think everyone has seemed to agree that like the app at the very least stops things like evictions and probably like to a degree cuts back against the financialization of housing. And that seems to sort of have a pretty big outsized impact of just like neoliberalism and shit like that and globalization. I think that 2NR, there's a risk of like the app retrenching this stuff, but I think that just like a lack of contextualization makes me very clear what the terminal to this is in this debate in the context of like what the impact to that link argument is that outweighs the link term, right? Because like there's a line from Sterling's 2AR where he's just like, the links just like definitely outweigh the link terms, right? Even if like they get like, you know, the summer single link like our office just outweighs because it stops like evictions and stuff like that, and that just like outweighs. And I think that Sterling is correct. Like the 2NR, I don't really know how the alternative solves in this stuff, and so I think it just like need a lot more explanation of like how alternative solves these things. So that's kind of my core issue with the debate. The first thing, like the core part of my decision. The first thing I think about is the framework debate. I'm AF on framework because I don't think the negative has really explained to me what the sort of proactive model of debate they've defended is, and I don't really know what the terminal to is. So you make this argument like, oh, like we test epistemology, AF, it's good to test epistemology, but I don't really know like how does this modify the way I think about AF-neg wing conditions? Like what does this mean for like the plan? Am I just leaving it from the dock? Like does the AF get to like do at least the red? Or the AF like still gets the confidence plan? Like what are we excluding here, right? And so I ended up coming away very confused with like what the negative model debate is. So it's like even though the 1AR 2AR framework is a very bog standard, like we get the plan, our offense outweighs, clash good. I do end up just kind of defaulting that just because it's the only sort of cogent model of debate I think anyone's putting forward in this debate. Sterling, your phone did the thing again. So as it stands, an AF on framework, and at the point that that's the case, all of these sort of problems that I have with the alternative link explanation of the 2NR kick in. So how do we win this debate when we are negative? I think that there are two things that I think you need. I think the first one is I need a much more robust push on the 2.5 things. Much more robust push on the alternative. I need to know a lot more about what queering the home looks like. I like this alternative. I like this evidence. I think this is a very interesting argument to make about the question of like the way in which like refusing housing allows for the creation of homes. I think that like the Ripley evidence talks about. I think just like exploring that dynamic more, I think can be interesting. What are sort of normative views of kinship, right? These are questions that I just like find personally very interesting, and also just like I think like could sort of be the sort of strategic question that you're missing to win these debates, right? It's just like how does the alternative create homes where the AF does not, right? So like that's just kind of thing, just like talking about the history, like for example, like in the context of like queer culture, like drag queens, the history that they have in terms of like housing, sort of like trans youth who get kicked out, right? And sort of role that they've played in like queer communities, right? Also like this sort of question of like how sort of like queer spaces sort of like come out in the 70s and 80s, i.e. The role of like for example, like the thing that I'm most familiar with, right, being who I am, is like, the history of like the way in which like gay men sort of like covered for each other and created safe spaces in like clubs and stuff like that, and how like clubs and like cruising can be seen as like a place to create a home for oneself, right? Those sort of things, right? Or I think the questions that the alternatives get to just like explaining like what do these sort of practices look like, right? What does a queer home mean, right? What does it mean to house difference, right? I understand, because like typically, just like as a person, you should probably know who Audre Lorde is. Like Audre Lorde is very cool and very important to the history of like a lot of the sort of theoretical stuff in debate, and like you should just read Lorde because Lorde's really good. But externally, it's like if we're getting into the question of like Lorde stuff, right, using those examples like the Combahee River Collective, sort of those things, right? These are the things that I like want in the 2NR that I'm not getting, because I get just kind of like a blurb about how it's like housing difference, reject the figure of the human, and I'm willing to just kind of, and that's it, and I don't have enough to sit down here on. The other thing I think I need is like a big sort of like impact framing, either at the link level or external impact level, because as it stands, it's like I have the link argument, which is like humanist discourse of rights, impact is like overkill, and that's it. And I need like just more explanation, like how does overkill interact with the AF's analytic of like sort of like computation and capitalism. So what I end up thinking I kind of need is like, I just want you to throw down more at like the theoretical level of just like how does the sort of negative analytic of violence interact with like the AF's arguments about like what is functionally like when the 1AR becomes just like the cap K, right? And I think just like throwing down more on that question and explaining that helps me sort of like be a lot more comfortable being neg if I have an explanation of like, here are the ways in which like the sort of question of kinship subtends things like the property relation, or can't explain it, here's why our offense outweighs, right? Like you're doing a good job explaining things like overkill and like the critique of humanism, but you're missing like the debate mechanics of it, where it's like, I don't have like, this outweighs because blah, 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 right? Like that's just like what I need, is I just need like the sort of, like you clearly know what you're talking about, and I like that. I like judging sort of like younger K-debaters who clearly know what they're talking about, but like I'm missing the sort of meat and potatoes, just like the technique that I can be willing to sit down on, right? Of just like, I can say, like, look at the 2NR and be like, neg because this turns this and this outweighs this and this solves this, right? And that's what's missing in the 2NR, is just like this broader sort of like framing argument, just like how do these arguments interact with the app? Because as it stands, all this offense is kind of floating. It's like, I don't think there's no risk of link. Like, decent medium risk app is humanist, decent medium risk overkill is thing, but just like 2AR is just like, we have a link terminal, doesn't solve shit, plan solves evictions, that outweighs. And like, I can kind of sit down on that just because it's like, just at a technical level, it's like I understand how those things interact and solve. And I think Sterling's just doing a better job explaining that than you are. So it's just like the debate technique is kind of what I'm missing for this 2NR, which like is certainly like one of the harder things to get. If you want like my recommendation, just like, I don't think there are any LDers worth watching who are K-debaters. I think just go watch college policy K-debates and just watch how like,
That's what I do.
yeah, it's just like, so it's like I learned to do debate by watching John Spurlock from like Cal Berkeley, right? Because like he was so good at like translating all the sort of 2 and C2 and R stuff. Yes, you can come in it, and I'm giving an RFD. This is my student. Just like Spurlock was always really good at just like translating this into like the debate technique, where he would explain the theoretical thing, and then at the end of every link argument, he would go like, and this turns this part of the app because blah blah blah, and he would explain how that like Dex app solved to work, and this outweighs this argument because blah blah blah, or and this solves this because blah blah blah, right? Just those sort of things, right? But yeah, like OU was really good. Like Nico was insanely good at this, right? If you want to go way back in time, like OUCL, like George and Rashid. Fun fact, George is my last year once. I'm old, I've been in debate for a long time. Was really good at this stuff, but just like watching like the sort of college policy like K-teams, I think are like the best way to learn how to translate this dense theoretical stuff into technique, and just like examples, concretization, explanation is kind of like the way to do that and to translate it to like winning arguments. So yeah, so those are kind of like my core notes for you. So like, listen up. Notes for you, I think that, like I said, 1AR solvency explanation needs to be broken down. I think that this app solvency evidence is a little janky. I think that like the right to the city stuff, like the shit that like Elmer's kids are reading, I think honestly like the financialization stuff like that, like maybe more questionably topical, but I think just like probably solves these internals about financialization better. I also just think like this impact card, like if you want a good impact card about computation, you should just do like the Bembe card that me and Brett read last year when we like were going for cybernetics every single fucking negative round of the season. Because like the Bembe card is really good at like computational capital. It's just like a very good impact argument. I think it's better than Robinson. But yeah, but like overall, just like my problem with like the 1A and 2A is just like dearth of like 1AC solvency explanation makes it sort of like ambiguous, and like a 2 and R that pulled together tighter on either framework or just like a link turns case alt solves would have put you in a bad spot, because it's like as it stands, I don't really understand like what the AF's sort of model of like reappropriating infrastructure looked like. I think it's good enough in this debate just because there's like a dearth of 2NR pushback on this, but like had the 2NR like been more on top of stuff, like the 2NR would have been in like big trouble. So just like more explanation of just like here's how the absolute right works, like here's how that plays out, right? Which is why I think the right to the city stuff is just better about this question.
Yeah, so
that makes sense.
There was like a mishap that I realized actually right as the light dropped, and I realized when I was reading, it was that I actually didn't save changes which had new solves and stuff that I talked to Jerry Burke about, and I was pretty annoyed about that. But I had to run it, so.
I mean, in that scenario, maybe I'm a dick for this, but in that scenario, I would just be like, oh fuck, what was the F sent before the debate?
No, this is new.
Oh, it's breaking you? Oh, if I were breaking you and I would just be like, sorry, I sent the wrong version of the F in the doc, I'll send this later, this solves card's different, read the card. Like, that's what I would do, but I get it. And that was very nice of you for that. But yeah, so just like, if you have like better solvency stuff, fair enough, and maybe next time I judge you, like this problem will be solved. But as it stands, just like, that's my big problem with 102, where it's just like, lack of explanation as to like how the app interacts with like the movements inside and like what the reappropriation infrastructure that Bella's talking about looks like. And I just think like better evidence, better explanation on that makes me a lot like more comfortable, like a lot cleaner affirmative.
Okay. Do you think that like the 1AC overall is like constructed good? I know you have like a background in this type of thing.
I mean, yeah, this is like the only argument I coached for 2 years straight, but like, I like that. I think the Bella cards are fine. I think that like, you know, the Robinson impact card is a little funny, and I think there's better evidence you can read, but like, I don't hate the idea of the act, right? I just think like it's just like accepts and solves problems. Like, no, I think the act's interesting, and I think like it seems like the Beller stuff, like you seem to have a pretty good handle on it.
Yeah,
Just
I like the book.
Yeah. I think you should be leveraging like the Beller stuff more against the alternative and be talking about just like how like Beller's whole argument is like visual economies valorize certain subjects. So like queer kinship is a great example of how like virtual economies can like get co-opted by neoliberalism. Right? It's sort of like just like the classic resiliency case stuff, right? Is like what I think like should be the 1A or 2A against this argument. It's just like sort of decentralized stuff that doesn't deal with the question of infrastructure directly, valorize resilience of it, they get trapped up in like the visual, what Bella calls it, the visual economy, or whatever the fuck. Yeah, whatever the fuck that means, I don't know. I thought that Bella work kind of sucked, honestly.
Jared said it like reshaped his whole world.
I think that Beller is literally a crypto bro now, and that's kind of all I need to know. I'm more confident than ever that I want nothing to do with like the ANCOMs, if that is like their fucking politics.
What's your status?
Yes, I am a very grumpy tanky. You know this. But yeah, so just like that's like my position, and also like the 2NRs, just like when you make like the Beller stuff, like make those framing arguments about how like their shit is too humanist and it leads to them like reinscribing. Because like for example, like Beller, like the 1AC author, he literally writes for like fucking Coinbase, like the Bitcoin magazine, right? Like militant radical, this guy kind of he is not. Let's be honest with each other here, right? Like the dude's kind of as co-opted as you can get, right? At the point that you're like shilling for NFTs as part of like the left-wing project, like we kind of lost the fucking plot a little bit, right?
So wait, do you think I need better like explanation of the links then?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like more spinning the link in the context of what the app does and explaining how like their sort of radical criticisms of like computation don't line up with like what the app actually does and how they reinscribe things. Right? I just need like a more robust explanation of like the interaction between the links and the app's theorization of how violence happens, like the computation stuff, right? Just like more of a throwdown on just like what in this debate kind of ends up being just like the cap K with like words about computers that don't mean anything, right? But it's like that should be like the thing. It's just like explaining like how does like the commodity and value form? How can they not explain things like overkill? And how does like sort of the normative structure of the humans subtend those things in ways that means like the app can't solve, right? Just like the app is too humanist. Sure, I need an impact to that. That is like app can't solve because it is too humanist because blah blah blah. App reproduces sort of heteronormative violence because it's not blah blah blah. Aiden, Sterling, can y'all two shut the fuck up for like 2 minutes? Sorry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
No, nothing.
Cool.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You said you like younger K debaters who know what they're talking about. Am I a younger K debater that knows what I'm talking
Aren't you a fill debater?
about? Yeah.
No comments. I'm not at liberty to say.
That's crazy.
So they are, but I'm not.
Aiden, I wouldn't be at liberty to say for you either. I wouldn't be too cocky.
That's crazy. I definitely
Because I came in here ready to have a fill debate, and then
Yeah, we won.
Cool.
Zion plus dissent.
I thought it was gonna be like a new
You have 200
fill.
dissent. I'm so fucking proud. Was it right still?
Straight.
Huh?
Well, you
It was
got
straight.
it wrong.
That's dissent.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's the next app.
Nice.
Not this.
He
What
stole
the
a
fuck did he say was the next app we're gonna break? He's gonna break? What did he say?
Lefebvre, like right to the sea.
It was Hobbes.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
That's crazy, bro. Bro, we're
Oh.
getting racist up in this video.
Wait, Sterling.
It's not Hobbes. Yeah.
I have like.
Yeah,
I
have
was
you
gonna
read the
say,
Bratton book,
I
Sterling?
just said either way.
Have you read the Bratton book?
No.
So Bratton has this like, so the stack, that book is 300 pages too long, but like the Bratton book does have this really interesting section where he talks about the type of shit that always talk about like reappropriating infrastructure. The difference is Bratton actually explains what the fuck that looks like.
Okay, yeah.
So like I think like reading, maybe not all the stack, but maybe like the introduction and like the last chapters you might
What's the book called? The Stack?
Yeah, the stack.
The Stack. Okay. Dude, I told you, this man should be the original one.
Huh?
What? I told him he should be the original one.
I don't know if I'm like ordinal one really.
I mean, I like to.
I don't.
I do
That's
have
fair.
a little bit.
I don't vote for K debaters often enough to be a K debater's ordinal one, despite popular.
I'm not a K debater.
Thanks for good.
Of course not. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Like, you know me, it's whatever. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about stuff. Just
How many
like,
Mosgard books do you have?
I like this a lot, and I look forward to judging it.
I'm getting that all day. People are like, I like it, but you didn't do.
It's whatever. Look, execution. What year are you?
So real.
What year are you?
I'm gonna do.
Yeah, so you got more. You got time, right? Like, it's whatever. Just like yeah, it's like that execution is
I
like.
started last year.
Oh yeah, you're fucking fine. Yeah, so execution is that hardest last little bit to get good at. Right? It's just like if you know the stuff. That is the easiest thing to do. Oh shit! Just like watch like fucking Burger like Spurlock.
What was the
Or, like,
other one?
That's a good go for this sort of thing, right?
Alright. Yeah, that's
Nico.
that first one was
It's like
fun.
Darius and Jazz. Darius is an old friend of mine.
3-1 at the Greenhill Fall Classic. Alex, you gotta say hi.
Coached me in my
Hi, vlog.
but